Good morning and welcome to Astronomy Podcast, Episode 3. My name is Chris Gilliam. I'm your host, and I'm here with...
Greg Hawkins.
And Greg, what do you do?
What do I do? I am an associate pastor. I'm a retired state correctional officer. So my ministry stuff is primarily pastoral care and teaching and some administrative stuff, but that's not really my wheelhouse.
And you run the men's ministry.
I do. I run I run part of it. I run the weekly Bible study, and I partner that with with Don, and I fill in for the senior pastor on Sundays on occasion, and I take care of probably another large area of responsibility administratively is congregational security and campus security.
Very cool. So that sort of answers the question in what ways the Lord's called you into service, but I wanted to start out a little bit by asking how the Lord called you into service. You have quite a testimony. I wanted to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I became a Christian in 1992, and it came about really, I guess I should probably back up just a little bit. I've always known what it was to be a Christian. My grandparents were Christians, and my grandmother made sure I understood the plan of salvation from the time I was about 5 or 6 years old. I just, had decided that it, wasn't for me, that I would, meet God someday on my own terms, but not right now. I'll stay in my lane and let him stay in his. And, but I always believed he was there. So that's kind of, the foundation for where I was at. I was never an agnostic or, an atheist or anything like that. I believed there was a God, and I believed, in Christ, or believed he existed. I just didn't submit myself to him. But in 1990, I started work for the Department of Corrections, and my first year was rather uneventful, but then I got transferred to the Bay Area to San Quentin. And, I started having a rough time in my marriage and started having just hating the commute, kind of had an attitude towards inmates. I kind of had this attitude that they didn't have anything coming. And because I started to become miserable, I started kind of plotting and planning on my way to work how I was going to make an inmate's life miserable that day. And it got to the point, in the drive, because the drive to San Quentin was almost 2 hours each way. So, it got to the point where people really didn't want to work around me much. And mainly because I tended to make things happen around me, negative things happen around me. And so right at kind of the peak of all these things going on in my life and, my marriage and, in trouble, my kids giving me problems, everything. And just hating my particular life at that time in general. Unbeknownst to me, on my way to work one evening, I get to the prison just to find out that I've been redirected to to report to a place where a bunch of officers were going to be addressed. And so I go to that particular location, and our associate warden is there, and there had been a planned execution for that night at the prison, and I was told that I was going to be participating in that. You didn't have an opportunity to decline. That wasn't an option. It was an order.
Maybe.
And I was one of those kind of people that kind of felt like, I had this attitude that, I could pull the lever and eat a ham sandwich and sleep like a baby that night and never be bothered because these guys didn't have anything coming to begin with.
Hey.
And that's, how I kind of rolled into that experience thinking I was going to react. But In actuality, it became very different than that. It was the first time that the prison had conducted an execution in, since 1969, I believe. And this was, 1993 or 1992, I guess. And it was the first execution that we had had in all those years. And so it became a real kind of carnival atmosphere. And it was something I had a hard time reconciling with. The prison, became packed with protesters and supporters, and the sheriff's department had to come and beef up the perimeter of our prison, and the highway patrol had to monitor traffic and come on grounds and, give us added security on the inside. The Coast Guard had to patrol outside because San Quentin's on the bay, and I had to, keep people away from the shore. And there was just hundreds of media vans and stuff, television stations, national, local, radio, all of that there. And it created this real carnival event. The job that I was given that night was to escort the witnesses. There's 44 witnesses to the execution, and my job was to process them and escort them to the gas chamber viewing area. So I had to basically strip them all out, make sure none of them had cameras or recording devices or anything like that on their persons. I issued them one legal pad of paper and a pencil, to take notes with, and that was all they could have. And so the witnesses were kind of a combination of media people and the victims, people who had association with the killer. And because, of all of that, it took a while to process them. And then I would escort them to the gas chamber, put them up there in the galley seats, and then wait outside. They'd shut the door, and you wait outside. And there's a light on the roof where the ventilation is for the execution chamber that tells you whether the execution's in progress or not. So you wait out there until the light, turns green. And when the light turns green, then you go back in and you escort them out. So what ended up happening was early on when the execution first started, the inmate's name was Robert Alton Harris. When the execution started, he was in good spirits. He was prepared. He knew what was coming, and he had reconciled himself to it and everything. And this was in the days before lethal injection. This was the gas chamber. And so, they escort him into the gas chamber and strap him down, and, he's smiling and he's talking to the people around him and everything like that. And I get the witnesses inside, then I go wait outside. And then I get a radio call telling me to come get the witnesses. There's been a stay of execution. So come and get the witnesses, take them back to the staging area. We wait. An hour or two goes by. The execution's back on. The stay, the stay was vacated by the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we take him back an hour later, do the same process all over again. By the time it was all said and done, he had gone back and forth. We had taken the witnesses back and forth 3 or 4 times, and half the night had gone by. And by this time, they literally he couldn't stand on his own. He was so traumatized by, this point. And then they finally executed him. And, it was only after the U.S. Supreme Court had said, we will hear no more stays in this matter, from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so he was executed.
That's the court based out of San Francisco, right?
Yeah. And so the irony in it is, I guess, is that the same people who were trying to save his life were actually the ones who were traumatizing and torturing him, through the prolonging of this process. He was actually prepared, early on, but by the end of the process, he was obviously very traumatized. So anyway, all of that goes on, and I finally get off work in the morning, and shortly after the execution, and I had to think about that all the way home back to Sacramento. And
It was a long drive.
it was, and I went through a lot of emotions. I started questioning all kinds of things. It was like, first of all, uh, I wasn't the person I thought I was going to be. Um, I was emotionally disturbed by everything I saw. Um, I didn't know. I didn't know I would react that way. I had a hard time even talking about it. Excuse me. I went back home and I tried to tell Patty about it, my wife, and I would start bawling. I couldn't even talk to her about it. And I started thinking about things. Well, if life is not that important, if his life was not that important, if it was this carnival, celebratory atmosphere, what's my worth? What's my life, worth? What's it? What value do I have in this world? And all of those things were flooding through me, and I didn't know how to deal with them. But unknown to me, the Lord actually had a plan in all of that for me. And so I get back to work and, fast forward a couple weeks, and now I'm on vacation relief. So vacation relief is, when you're a younger officer, a newer officer, everybody has to take their turn at vacation relief. And basically, it typically runs for anywhere from 3 months to 2 years, depending on staffing needs. But you go through a period of time where you are actually filling in between filling in for people's vacations.
Mhm.
So you could be 2 weeks in one place, 3 weeks in another, so on and so on. And any shift, any days off, it's always in a matter of flux.
Mhm.
So shortly after all this happened, I'm put in a position called the rotunda officer. It's a traffic control point inside the prison, and I was there on second watch. That's day shift, 6 to 2. And an inmate had to come through my station and check in with me before he proceeded to his job. And he was an X-ray technician,
Mhm.
and so he was a lifer. He was doing life without the possibility of parole. Been in prison since he was 19 years old. He was about 40 then, and he would come through my station, and I knew who he was and what he was about, and he'd check in with me before he'd go on to the prison hospital. And so he would try to talk to me in the morning, and I would just ignore him, because that's who I was back then, and didn't have any time for him. Still working through my own stuff, still not caring for inmates, but kind of just not sure what I thought or felt at that point. And he would, greet me every morning. He was polite, and it bugged me. It bugged me, that this guy who was doing life in prison seemed to be so full of joy, and I was miserable. I hated life. I went home every night. He never did. He never even had a driver's license. He'd been in prison since he was 18 or 19 years old. So one day he comes through my station again, says, "Good morning, CO," like he always did. And I finally decided I needed to respond to him. So I said, "Good morning." And I go, "How are you today?" And he goes, "I'm blessed, thank you." And I'm thinking, blessed? What has he got to be blessed about? I couldn't figure that out for the life of me. It was like, that statement just didn't make any sense. But what I did know is I wished I had what he had. I wanted what he had. How could he have that kind of, joy in his situation? And I had none, and I'm the one with all the freedom.
Right.
So fast forward another couple weeks, I get another job change. And this time, I'm coming off vacation relief relatively early. And I get assigned to a position on the third floor of the hospital. And it is the HIV reception unit for the prison
Mhm.
on the third floor of the hospital. This is going to be my permanent assignment. And AIDS or HIV was thought of very differently in those days than it is today. It was sort of the boogeyman. It was we thought you could catch it by just being, next to somebody. Nobody knew exactly how you got it, but we knew it was a death sentence back then. We didn't have drugs to treat it. I think AZT was the only drug that they had to treat it, and all it did was prolong things a little bit. Um, it didn't cure or put it into any kind of remission.
Right.
So very freaky, environment to have to work in, because, you feel like you're, working with lepers, like you're in a leper colony kind of a thing. And, guys, basically, it, these were inmates who had been out on parole, who had HIV, who were picked up, off the street and drugged back into prison. And they go to the HIV reception unit because they were usually pretty, from drugs and, abuse on the street. They were pretty emaciated by the time they returned to prison. So
Mhm.
the prison hospital tried to get them, get them fed, get them on some AZT, get their, T cell level count back up a little bit, get them stabilized. So that was the mission there. And we were the security for that mission for the hospital there at the prison hospital. So I go to the job, first day on the job to meet my partner, my new partner. I open the office door and I go in there. And that inmate that I had been seeing in the rotunda at my previous assignment was sitting in a chair with the officer that was my new partner.
Mhm.
And they had books and stuff spread out all over the table. And they were obviously doing some kind of, studying together. I saw a Bible, I didn't know what was up. So I'm like, oh, don't my partner, hey, excuse me, I'll get back to you, whatever you got going on here, I'm not going to get in the way of it, So I got out. And he's like, no, come on back in, come on back in. So I come back in, and he sits me down, and in front of the inmate, and we, he introduces himself, and he puts everything on the table right away. And he wants to make sure that I'm okay because this could be considered fraternization, between him and the inmate. He wanted to make sure I understood what the standing was. He said, I'm a Christian. I'm actually a seminary professor, part-time. This is my job too. Inmate so-and-so here is a Christian,
Mm.
and he's going to seminary right now.
Wow.
And he's going through the seminary I teach at. We have permission from the warden to do this, and if, so just so it's all above board, make sure you don't have a problem with it, and I'm like, hey, you do you, yeah, I'm good, So over time, I got to know both of them really well, and both of them started working on me about the gospel. And like I said, I knew, what the plan of salvation was before I ever, became a Christian. I understood it. My grandparents, my grandmother particularly, made sure I understood it.
Mhm.
And I was going through a period of time where the Lord really took me, to a low spot, and wanted me to know that he was the solution to that, and these two guys were the vehicle that he used. And so ironically, the very people that I persecuted, just because I hated them, became one of them that led me to the Lord, and the other one, an officer. So the two of them.
So just to be clear, this is again the same gentleman that would come by and say, "Good morning, CO." Every morning.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So I end up, accepting the Lord, while I was working there. And as a baby Christian, the interesting thing is that my partner really showed me what it was to be a Christian, where the rubber met the road, not just kind of like this, this I believe intellectual, sort of, settled in my mind kind of thing. Cause, as the scriptures tell us, you say you believe, and that, good, even Satan and his demons believe and tremble, or,
Exactly.
it's more about what it's who you are submitting yourself to.
Hmm.
And so, in this case, he showed me what it was to walk the walk. And in one particular case that just struck to my core, we had an inmate, who was in the late stages of AIDS. And he had been experiencing dementia and wasting syndrome, and it he looked like somebody who had just walked out of Dachau concentration camp,
Was dementia common for the end
Yeah,
stages?
end stage is really common with that. And so their cells are actually hospital rooms, but they're just secured hospital rooms, right?
Right.
And so he was in there just yelling out and just incoherent and making no sense. His room was covered in feces because he defecated all over himself. He had no control over anything.
Mhm.
We had contacted the medical staff to, come deal with him because that's not our job to deal with, that. The sanitation of the inmates is not, our deal. And at that time when we were particularly scared of HIV, it really, wasn't our job to do.
Right.
So, but they kept putting us off because they didn't want to deal with it either, So, without even talking to me, my partner, he gets our inmate porters together. They're the ones who take care of the cleaning and stuff of the general, area that, they mop the floors and, do all that sort of stuff. Well, he gets them all together and he's having a powwow down by the office with them. And we had like 4 or 5 of them.
Mhm.
And I'm not with them. I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm just kind of looking at a distance, like, what he's talking to him about. Well, come to find out, he worked out a plan with him. He was going to take the inmate out of the cell while they cleaned it. They were going to go in after he got the inmate out and completely sanitized the cell. They had agreed to do that.
Mhm.
At the other end of our hallway on the 3rd floor, we had a room with what's called a sitz bath. It's like a jacuzzi kind of a bath, and it's meant for, people who have bed sores and, muscle aches or whatever. It's a therapeutic bath.
Mhm.
So he walks down the hallway and he turns on the sitz bath, gets it, going, and he comes back up the hallway. I'm just watching, comes back up the hallway, goes into that inmate's cell, and he comes out and he's carrying him in his arms. He's carrying this inmate in his arms who's covered in his own feces and can't even walk.
Wow.
Carries him all the way down to the sitz bath and bathes him, and while he did that, the inmates cleaned his cell.
Wow.
And then he brought him back and put him back to bed. Put himself at risk because we didn't know what, again, we didn't know what AIDS was, exactly how it was transmitted.
Mhm.
We knew it carried a death sentence at that time. And, but he didn't, blink once for his own safety, or, didn't think twice about taking this inmate, picking him up, and carrying him and giving him a sitz bath and bringing him back.
Wow.
So, he really showed me what it was to walk. That really impacted me. That single event really impacted me more than any other. And so, it was shortly after that, I think I had one other job maybe. And then it was shortly after that I got a transfer, to go back towards Sacramento to Mule Creek. And so that's where I went. That's where I finished up my time. And, I got to tell you, for the remainder, because I'm fast forwarding for a lot of that stuff at San Quentin, but a lot of, I would say most of the miracles that I saw God perform were at San Quentin State Prison, not out in the world, but in San Quentin State Prison. And it was very impactful for me. It changed my whole life. And I was never the same after that. So by the time I transferred to Mule Creek, I decided that ministry was something that I wanted to get involved in. I wasn't sure how. I didn't know if it was going to be prison ministry. I started teaching as a volunteer chaplain out at juvenile hall for about 6 years, taught it to the kids out there.
Mhm.
I didn't know if it was going to, the chaplaincy was going to take me inside the prison. I didn't know how he was going to use me, to be honest with you. But I started going to Bible college because I knew that, I needed to prepare myself. I needed to know more than I knew, And so I met other Christians at Mule Creek. And, one of the, kind of funny things is like the staff and inmates at Mule Creek only knew me as a Christian. They only knew me as approachable and, caring and, stuff like that. The inmates at San Quentin, knew a completely different Greg. And so occasionally inmates would transfer from San Quentin to Mule Creek, and they'd be talking amongst each other, saying, an inmate at, Mule Creek would say, oh, our CO used to be, at San Quentin. Maybe, you knew him when you were there, and they, throw my name out there. And oftentimes they wouldn't think they're talking about the same person, and this way. And it's like, I can't believe he's, neither one could believe that I was the way that, the other one was saying it. So, the one from San Quentin may not believe that I was this, kinder, sensitive guy. And the ones from Mule Creek couldn't believe that I was ever anything but, but it made for some interesting conversations. And then they'd come up and tell me about it. But, so again, most of my experiences, even at, Mule Creek, were the same. Those are where I saw God do some of the most miracles. And that's where I found other Christian friends. One of my best friends, Manny Gonzalez, he's probably one of my best friends in the world. Well, he is my best. He's more than a best friend. But anyway, that's where we met. Was at Mule Creek, and he's in ministry, I'm in ministry. And then when I retired from the department, I had finished Bible college, and I came on staff at Touchstone, and here I am. That's how I got there.
Epic story. That's the understatement of the century. Here I am, huh?
Yeah.
To be clear, what was the Bible college you attended?
A Calvary Chapel Bible College.
Calvary Chapel, that's in L.A.
Yeah, but we had an extension campus in Sacramento because at the time, Warehouse Christian Ministries, who is a Calvary Chapel affiliate, was also sort of a mega church in the area at the time, and so they had an extension campus of the Bible college, and that's where I did mine. So
very cool. So that's what leads into the next. I'm sorry. This is a great story, a great testimony. That leads me to the next question of, so what kind of notable work for people who want to do the kind of things you do in ministry? What kind of notable work does it take to get there every day? What do you do, and what are the challenges that you face?
Well, some of it is when it comes to, because a lot of this evolved with me as a Christian, right? So some of the skills I didn't have prior to, but the Lord has developed in me. And some of them, it's stuff I've done all my life, right? So I've always felt like my spiritual gift, one of the principal spiritual gifts that I have, it predates me even becoming a Christian. It's like it's the way that God wired me was to be a protector. And so it's taken many shapes and forms over the years, and the training, has helped me to better be a protector over the years, first working in loss prevention, predate that. First being military police in the Army, then, being in loss prevention, then being in the Department of Corrections, right? So all that kind of prepared me for what I did ultimately, today, in terms of protecting the flock and, campus, security, that side of the house, right?
Mm.
The other stuff, primarily, I would say, is pastoral care. So meeting with people, counseling people, talking to people, some of that, Bible college prepared me for. Some of that is what you learn in law enforcement, because you are a counselor too. You're not just the cop in prison. You're also their counselor, their confidant, the person they, come to process things with. You're the one who de-escalates. You spend an awful lot of time de-escalating situations. And so some of it was, prepared there, and others just the Lord did along the way, when it comes to, like, say, marriage, marriage is one of those things that, I've been married almost 40 years. So, you know, I've got a little tenure. And so yeah, I've, pretty much been there, done that, so when it comes to, counseling and, helping Christians through their struggles in marriage and things like that, that's kind of where, that comes from. Also, I just started showing an aptitude for it. As a pastor, you get called on, for biblical counseling and, dealing with all kinds of issues and, relationships and you name it, struggles that people have. And one of the things that, I kind of, learned over time about life, um, I'm mindful of a quote from the movie Tombstone, where Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp are having a discussion about life, and Wyatt Earp is just frustrated and fatigued, and he tells Doc Holliday, "I can't wait to just have a normal life."
Mm-hmm.
And Doc Holliday says, "There is no normal life, Wyatt. There's just life." And so, I learned these lessons, over time too, that, we are just all trying to get through this thing together. And, if I would say the Lord softened me with anything, it's just, having empathy for others, being
Yes.
able to, accept people the way you find them.
Yeah.
And, to have a heart for them, and, along the way, experience has kind of given me some insights into some stuff. And I think, the Lord has used that. It, got, kind of met favorably, and you get kind of affirmed by others and by your leadership that, you're the one who should probably be doing this, not me. And so it kind of goes down that, it just kind of goes that way. And I don't think I'm particularly, skilled at it, but that's just kind of, how I ended up being there. So
You're a servant.
yeah, I try to be. And that's the other thing too, a pastor is not, is not, this person on a soapbox from on high. You are a servant. I'm mindful of something Chuck Smith, the founder of Calvary Chapel, said once, down, in Costa Mesa, and theirs is a huge church, and he would get young men all the time who would come up to him and say, "How do I get involved in ministry? I feel like the Lord has called me to, to the pastorate." Well, and his response was, "I'll show you exactly where you start," and he would take them by the arm and he would take them to the supply closet, open it up, hand them a mop and a broom and, a bucket and say, "This is where it begins."
Amen.
And it was not uncommon at all on a Sunday morning before church to find Chuck himself out in the parking lot picking up cigarette butts and paper,
Mm-hmm.
So, ministry is service. It really is. It starts with service. It starts with serving others. You don't do it for, with any expectations or anything like that. You do it because that's what we're called to do.
Right.
So,
Wonderful. Would you say there's a particular area that God has led you to be more passionate about than others?
pastoral care really, is, and I also have a huge burden for, the safety and security of our people, protecting our flock, whether that be spiritually, whether that be, materially, whether that be, physical safety, all of that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you expect me to, I may not get up first thing, and, I may not be woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning because, uh, for like counseling somebody,
Mm.
but call me because there's something wrong at the church or somebody's in physical, jeopardy, I'm up and running.
Yeah.
It's like, so those are, definitely those are the two main ones. Teaching is kind of incidental. I think I'm competent, but I'm not anything special.
I disagree, but please continue.
So, so, I mean, it's something that we're called to do, and it's something I do because I can, but it's not where my passion really is. My passion is in pastoral care and protection, protecting the flock. So,
Mm. Very cool. We've talked a lot about security and security issues because we go to the same church around Touchstone, and things like that. So when I ask this question, keep some of that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But if money were no object, what would you do in your curve?
Well, see, if money were no object, and there are lots of practical obstacles, that money, definitely influences.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I also have to be aware that, you know, the way I think is not the way everybody thinks, and it's kind of like, thinking of it like, to the guy with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and it's like, so, from somebody like me, everything is a security issue. I see everything as a security issue. I would love to have a fence all the way around the property. I would love to have bollards in front of the doors, so a car can't run through it. I would love to, have cameras inside and outside the building. I would love all of that, right? I mean, that would be me. But I do recognize that that isn't what everybody else expects from it. There is an element of that isn't very welcoming looking. It's like, well, I get that. you know, we're welcoming. Yeah, we're welcoming here. You know, but that's the resistance you meet, and also, of course, the financial side of it, right? Because none of that stuff is cheap.
No.
So, yeah,
I'll see if we can buy some of those big balls that sit in front of some targets.
yeah.
It's a joke. Sorry, folks. Yeah.
But and those things are sort of a artistic bollard. A bollard, being an like an obstacle, will stop a vehicle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I understand, empathize, and am on the same page with you on most of that. I really do think, oh, God help us with we have a lot of homeless traffic, and sometimes they cause things, but we also have ministries to them. So yeah, I understand and hope that, we can make some positive movement in that direction in the near future. But Greg, this has been fantastic. Thank you for your time and your story, and for sharing. And if you don't mind, at some point, I'm probably going to call you back for some specialty topics.
Sure.
But, love and appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
All right, folks, till next time.